Hi, this is Sue Jackson with the Book by Book blog, and I'm here with a Friday Reads. Now, it's been a while since you've seen me because we've been on the road for 2 weeks, a week and a half, driving from our home on the East Coast all the way out to Oklahoma and back. My father-in-law passed away 2 weeks ago. He was 97. He lived a long, long life. He had pretty severe dementia, so it was time. And he wanted to be buried back in Oklahoma, where he spent all of his adult life. So we had a lot of arrangements to make, a lot of things to do. Our kids flew out. Well, one of our sons flew out. The other, unfortunately, got COVID and couldn't come. But we decided to drive. I've got immune problems, so I really didn't want to risk being on an airplane right now. And we wanted to take some things with us to give to our nephews anyway. So it was about a 4-day drive out there, and then about 4 days in town, and then 4 days back. So it's been a long, long trip and a lot of hours in the car. So with all that going on, I was still enjoying Big Book Summer. This is my annual challenge, now in its 10th year. And the idea is simply to read a big book or two or more, whatever you choose during the summer. And here a big book means 400 or more pages. So for starters, while I was on the trip, I finished Project Hail Mary by Weir. And I don't typically talk about the books I'm not currently reading on a Friday Reads, but I couldn't let the opportunity go by without mentioning this because it's one of the best books I've ever read. If you're familiar with his work, he's the author of The Martian, most famously, and also Artemis. And like those, this is a suspenseful science fiction story set out in space, but it is so much more than that. And it took me by surprise. And I can't say too much about it without spoiling it. And part of the delight of this book is experiencing it as you go. But all I will say is that, like The Martian, it's very funny, but along with that sense of humor, it's also incredibly heartwarming. This was a book I finished and just hugged to my chest. I never wanted it to end. Just absolutely delightful. So if it's been sitting on your to-be-read pile or on your list, or if you've never heard of it before, definitely read Project Hail Mary by Weir. So in the middle of the trip, I finished this and I started another big book, Lucky Turtle by Bill Rohrbach. Now, earlier this year, I attended a big book event called Booktopia that I go to every year. Although, of course, it was canceled the last 2 years. So this year was a really big deal. I said it's a big event. It's big in its attendees' minds. It's actually about like 100 or so readers and usually about 8 authors. And they spend the weekend together at the Northshire bookstore in Manchester, Vermont. And each year, the booksellers at Northshire pick the most amazing books by the greatest authors. And they're usually things you've never heard of or authors you're not familiar with. Now, in this case, Bill Rohrbach is actually, he's been nominated for all kinds of literary prizes. So he probably is well known to other people. I hadn't heard about him. So before Booktopia, I read most of the books on the list, and I talked about those back in March and April and May. But Lucky Turtle just came out the week that Booktopia was going on. So I bought a copy at the Northshire bookstore while I was there. The author signed it for me and put the little turtle stamp on there. And so I just started reading it this week. Since it is a little over 400 pages, I saved it for Big Book Summer. So this is about a teenage girl named Sindra, who, when she's 16, gets in some trouble. Her boyfriend, I don't want to tell you all the details because I think that comes, I don't think that's right at the beginning of the book. But Sindra's boyfriend and his brother kind of pull her along. She gets in some trouble. A judge decides that given her age and, you know, she's a good student, she's not been in trouble before, rather than sending her to like juvenile detention, they send her to Camp Challenge, this outdoor rehabilitation camp out in Montana. So Sindra goes out there. Now, she has a love of the outdoors already. She and her father are very close. Her mother's kind of cold. So this is going to be difficult for her because she can't talk to her parents for the first 6 months. And she gets out there and she's having some trouble adjusting. She meets a young Native American man named Lucky who works at the camp. He's a driver for the camp. And there are all kinds of rumors about Lucky. You know, one is that he doesn't speak, that he's mute. But Sindra learns that's not true. And she and Lucky get to know each other. And that's all I'm going to say. Because there are a lot of twists and turns in this novel, a lot of surprises. But it's very much a coming-of-age story about Sindra and about Lucky. He's a little older than she is, but pretty innocent and naive in the world. And I'm really enjoying it so far. So I'm about halfway, read in many hotel rooms along the way, and I'm really enjoying it. So that's Lucky Turtle by Bill Rohrbach. Now, audiobooks count for Big Book Summer too. So with this long trip, it was about almost 45 hours in the car, both ways, including the time in Oklahoma. So that's a lot of time. So my husband and I picked out a big book thriller. That's his favorite kind of book to listen to on the trip. And it worked out perfectly. We finished it like an hour and a half from home. We finished it. What we chose was Since We Fell by Dennis Lehane. Now, we both enjoy Dennis Lehane. Haven't read one of his books in a long time, though. And you may be familiar with him because many of his books have been made into movies. Just off the top of my head, Shutter Island is probably the most famous. Mystic River, Gone Baby Gone, I think that's what it's called. So many of his books have become even more famous because they were made into very well-received movies. So he tends to write psychological suspense. And this book was quite typical. It started out a little bit slowly, just kind of, and this is how he writes usually, sort of a slow build-up. You get a lot of background, you learn about the characters, things gradually, very, very gradually come together. And then, like the last quarter to a third of the book, things start to speed up, and there is suspense and thriller action and lots of twists and turns and surprises. So we both really enjoyed Since We Fell by Dennis Lehane, and it definitely helped the miles go by a little quicker. So that's what I've been reading. I would love to hear what you've been reading. Please let me know in the comments down below. I've been gone for a couple weeks, so I want to catch up. So let me know what you're reading, what you plan to read this weekend. And this was not a vacation trip, but I will include a few photos of the road trip at the end. All right, happy reading this weekend.